everyone, and welcome to Adventures in Knowledge, Episode 4. Today we're talking about pockets, the history of pockets, and how pockets are pretty much a good sign of sexism throughout the ages. The more people know, maybe women will have really decent pockets at some point, which I would very much appreciate, by the way. However, I will say, the shorts I'm wearing today, these guys, really good pockets. Look, I can fit like full-on multiple keys in my hand. Right? Like, these are nice pockets. That is rare. That is a rarity for women. That doesn't happen. Which is also why I bought these guys. I mean, I wasn't about to just buy any shorts. I do, however, have some other shorts where it has pockets, but when you run, your phone will absolutely fall out of the pocket because it's like this angled or something. So like one end is like really tiny and one end's big. Pretty much useless. Now, I also want to say, I tried to find information about pockets for all cultures, for the history of the world. Unfortunately, history is very much told in a very European-centric way. So, like, 90% of what I'm going to say is European history of pockets. I did try to find information for, like, different Asian countries, for African countries. I'll be honest, I found pretty much nothing on Africa. I'm really sorry, I have nothing about pockets for that entire continent. As for Asia, I have a little bit on Korea, China, and Japan, but it's not very much. Sorry. The earliest evidence of pockets that we have is from 3300 BC, because in 1991, there was an Iceman discovered, literally this caveman preserved in ice, called Otzi, or Iceman, because, you know, found nice. People are not always the most creative with names. I can't blame them. I'm terrible at naming things. He had a pouch sewn into his belt, which had a scraper, a drill, a flint flake, bone awl, and dried fungus. Now, flakes were used for cutting, carving, hunting with, like, a bow, and probably other hunting as well. Awls were pointed tools for piercing holes. I mean, that could have been used for their belts or some other stuff. I'm not entirely sure what they would have used the awl for. It was also, the pouch was made out of leather or some sort of cloth from that time. It's really cool evidence that pocket-like structures existed even back then. Admittingly, it's just a pouch, but honestly, the history of pockets involves a lot of pouches, as you will soon see. We skip on forward from 3300 BC to the Middle Ages, because honestly, there's not a lot of information in that whole giant span of time. Okay, we hit the 13th century. Here, there was actually pretty good equality between men and women when it came to pockets, or at the time, pouches. Specifically peasants, I don't believe the upper class had quite so much pockets. They wouldn't really need to. They didn't need to carry things. I mean, obviously, some of them were probably carrying swords and stuff, but that's not really the same thing as a pocket. That's a holster for your sword. Okay, so at the time, 13th century, they were pouches that were tied with rope on the outside of people's outfits. Men and women both equally had accessible pouches. Then the problem of thievery came about. I mean, thieves were always a thing, but thievery of pockets and what's inside those pockets became a problem. It's also where the term pickpocket came about. One, you could literally, like, cut the rope and grab the whole pocket in one and run off. So there was that thing. You could literally steal the pocket itself and everything in it, or you could just slice a pocket open and grab all the stuff that falls to the ground. So there was definitely some pickpocketing going on. So that led to pouches starting to go on the inside of clothing. This is where things started to get unequal between men and women. Men's pouches usually were on the inside of their jackets or tunics, and women's were on their skirts. So that's just different areas. At that time, it still wasn't totally unequal. In the 15th century, it was still sort of visible pockets on the outside. 16th century, it became extremely popular to have pockets. 17th century. Now here's where we really hit the differences. 17th century is where it really became unequal between men and women, and when it started to become what we think of as pockets, at least for men. In the 17th century, they were sewn into men's pants, coats, jackets, whatever they've got, it was sewn in. Much like today. Women's were still separated and tied to themselves. So it was still a pouch more than a pocket for women, while an actual, what we would think of as pocket for men. Also though, women's pockets, which were pouches, were actually pretty awesome in the 17th century. I mean, it's not great that it wasn't sewn into their outfits or anything, but they were gigantic and often very intricate and given as gifts. Pockets were a fun thing to exchange to people because they were tied on and they weren't in your outfits. Women did often give those to others as just a gift. So that's kind of cool. But seriously, when I say they were giant, I mean giant. Here is a list of things I found women could carry or did carry in their pockets, which were, pouches. They could carry money, jewelry, keys, glasses, gloves, watches and cases, alcohol, snacks, pencil case, Bible, diaries, journals, notebooks, a thimble, pin cushion, knife, scissors, cards, perfume. Basically, you could just carry anything you wanted, which is pretty nice. I would enjoy if I just had a pocket that had snacks in it. You could carry, notebooks. Imagine that, just being able to walk around with a sketchbook in your pocket or something. That sounds nice. Anyway, so at that time, technically, yes, it was still uneven between men and women. It was starting to become more uneven, but I would say women got to carry a lot more, which is kind of nice, while men couldn't carry as much. However, the setback of this, women's were still more easily stolen because they were, in fact, separate, and also women had no access to these pockets. Now I'll explain that. Unlike men, whose pockets were sewn in and they could just reach in and grab whatever they needed, women's pockets, because of thievery having gone up in those centuries, they had the pockets tied around them on the inside. Now, to set things straight, around the 17th century, women had 2 undergarments and a petticoat, and it was just multiple layers upon layers upon layers of clothing. Now, the pocket was tied up around between the petticoat and the under petticoat. They couldn't really access what was in their pocket until they could get to a private area and remove a layer of clothing. So while women could carry a lot more than men, they couldn't really access it, so it was still pretty pointless. Also around the 1700s, the French Revolution occurred. Now, I'm not entirely sure how accurate this is, but I found a few sources that say this. At least in France, it became literally banned for women to have inside or outside pockets, specifically because they didn't want women to be carrying around revolutionary type material. Books of any sort, like I said, they had giant pockets, so nothing that would have gone towards the revolution. So on that one, women were literally banned from having pockets of any sort. Then we hit 1790s. Now here's where fashion began to change, and that has consequences to pockets and obviously a lot of things in life. For instance, random thing, I'm not going to do a whole episode on it, but the interesting thing, heels were actually made for men. Originally, men had heels and women wanted to look more masculine, so women started to wear heels. And then heels started to get designed to be more feminine, and you end up with the crappy heels that hurt people's ankles, and that women say are painful, and all that because heels became for women. But when heels were for men, and women started to use them, it was more like, if you've ever seen Star Trek, the original Star Trek, they all have sort of a little bit of a heel to their shoes. That's what heels were. Even before the 60s, I'm just saying, heels at that time, men and women had them. And honestly, I kind of prefer those kinds of heels. I have this really nice, boot sort of thing with one of those thick heels that's not that high, a little bit high. You can walk in it comfortably, and it's just nice. I also have shoes that have thinner heels, not as fun. And I pretty much only wear it to, weddings or something, so, yeah. Anyway. Plus, if you have wide feet, some of those heels, unless it's, really surrounded, your feet are just flying like this, going completely over the edges. And I know, I'm making an episode about pockets, but my point was simply that fashion has other things that are interesting. Also, around 1911 or so, I think it was, pink was actually a masculine color. It only became feminine later on. Pretty much any time women try to be masculine or something, it becomes a feminine thing later, and I don't know. There's a whole history of that. But anyway, also, I think it's ridiculous to give colors masculine or feminine to a certain degree. Like whatever color you like. Who cares? Wear whatever you want to wear on color. Maybe don't, depending on where you're from. If you're in an area with a lot of gangs, probably be careful about the color you're wearing. But you're probably smart enough to know that, so obviously, give or take. Think about what's around you, but if you're living a boring old middle-class life like me, probably wear whatever color you want. Not really a big deal. I do realize I probably don't wear much extreme colors or something on this. Where did I leave off? 1790s, right. Fashion was changing. Okay. So instead of the big giant hoop skirts, which I will show a picture over here for, instead of those big 1700s giant skirts, it became fitter, slimmer skirts, and a petticoat that would cover more, and you could probably fit like a pocket or something in there, became a very high waistline. This didn't really allow for big giant pockets. Giant pouches were no longer going to work. So instead, what was replaced with that was reticules. Reticules are just ridiculous, okay? First of all, you could barely fit even a small coin in there. Well, yeah, a coin. A coin could barely fit in a reticule. It was sold, you could say, to women as, if you have a reticule, it shows that you have men who can take care of you and handle all these stuff for you and you don't have to worry, so that's so great. Not really, but that's how they were selling it. So a lot of women became competitive about it. Also, part of the reason for the reticule was because at the time, women could not own their own money, they could not own property. Since women had absolutely no control over their own lives, really, they didn't need pockets for anything. So they had reticules, which, as fancily adorned as they were, are ridiculous. In response, though, I love this society from what I was reading about and studying with them. Okay, they were called the Rational Dress Society. It was in like the early 1800s an institute that they wanted to get rid of corsets. They wanted women to have more freedom of movement in outfits, to not be so constricted. They wanted women to have pockets. They wanted women to have the freedoms that could come with wearing clothes that you can move in, that can come with having pockets to put things in. Pretty much, they were an early feminist movement. I mean, they were a little early for the suffragette movement, but they were basically the starting point of that kind of. For instance, they had manuals instructing you how to sew pockets into your clothing, which I think is cool. Around the 1830s and 1840s, there were actually women sewing some pockets into their dresses. Now, it wasn't a lot, but it was becoming a thing, so that's nice. Skip on forward, I don't really have much for the later 1800s. You get to the early 1900s, 1910, suffragette movement begins. Like I said, the Rational Dress Society was about 100 years early for that, but they were still very much pushing in that direction. Now, suffragette movement, freaking love this. I love this. Their outfits that they came up with had 6 to 8 pockets. How nice would it be to have 6 to 8 pockets? I freaking want that many. I mean, put a snack in that one, put a phone in that one, put some keys in there, maybe a chapstick, which I also realized if you are not from a place that has really dry air, you don't need chapstick, which was a weird thought for me when I went to college. And I have a friend who's from Hawaii, and she was surprised the first time she needed chapstick, and it hadn't crossed my mind, but it makes perfect sense. When she said that, I was thinking, oh yeah, if you're in a place with high humidity, you are never gonna need chapstick. Or lotion, probably. I mean, you could probably still use it, but you probably don't need it. As I've said in another episode, I'm in Colorado. Sometimes I do need lotion, sometimes I need chapstick. It honestly depends. Our weather changes constantly, and it's pretty dry. So, anyway, sorry, I was talking about pockets. Things you can put in pockets. I mean, I'd love to put like a little sketchbook in there, or I think I just like having pockets. Imagine being able to put anything you want in there. Well, not anything. But you could probably put a tiny book if the pockets were big enough. Like, I have a mini book that was like Pocket Guide to Mischief, I believe is what it is. I haven't read it in a long time, but it's like little prank things. It makes me think Fred and George, but anyway. Then we skip forward to World War I. Practical outfits with functioning pockets. Because in a gigantic world war, you're gonna need to be able to put things in pockets, taking notes, whatever. Like, society's moving and there's a dangerous situation going on, so you're gonna need functioning pockets. You don't know if you're gonna need a watch for knowing when you need to meet up with people, breaking codes, whatever you need, you got it. Although code breaking was more of World War II. But anyway, then you hit like the 1920s. You lose some of the pockets, war's done. Men were wanting women to get back to looking more feminine. Women wanted to actually look more like masculine in some way. They wanted menswear type things. Menswear looks started to gain some traction in popularity, at least amongst women. I don't know how men felt about it, but women were really liking it. I know when people picture the 1920s, they picture flapper outfits and dresses, and so they don't picture a boyish look. But other than like flapper dresses and like that kind of thing, which was still more boxy, and the flapper dresses were supposed to kind of disguise curves. I think people sometimes forget that it wasn't actually supposed to like show curves. They were supposed to hide it. So there was even that more boxy type of a look that people were wanting at the time. But outside of that, the designer Coco Chanel, for instance, designed outfits that were supposed to be there to help liberate women. They had pockets. Now, maybe they weren't that deep and everything, but they were actually pockets on women's outfits. She also popularized, apparently, it was called the pocket slouch. Now, the pocket slouch, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a picture of it. If I can, I will show you. But it's this. Yep, pocket slouch. Became a thing because women could actually put their hands in a pocket. They could never have stood in that sort of stance before. But like I said, the pockets were kind of shallow, so not super functioning. So, you know, not great, but it's getting somewhere. 1930s. The Great Depression hit. Men who had come back from World War I, people were a little more free and stuff. They didn't mind. Some women were still sort of working in the 20s, but not as many. But especially when the Great Depression hit, men were taking fully back into the workforce. Women were pretty much being kicked out. I mean, some women still decided to work because Great Depression, everyone was struggling. Men didn't really want women in men's clothes. A lot of men were very against it. They did not want women to look masculine in any way or to have masculine type clothing. I would say today the standard of that would be a lot of people give backlash if a man is wearing a dress, which I think is ridiculous because I've seen some men wear dresses and they pull it off way better than I do. So sometimes it's a matter of walking with confidence in whatever you're wearing. And why should you care if men are wearing dresses? First of all, if you look back in history, you're going to see, okay, Greece. Almost everybody, no, pants weren't really a thing. Everyone was wearing basically dresses. If you think of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, his night outfit, it's a night robe, night dress, basically. People would see that as a dress today. But that was actually pretty common for men and women. So people keep acting like it's this whole new concept for men to be able to wear dresses, but it's not. Also, you go to Scotland. Kilts were a thing and still are a thing and have been a thing for a really long time. Basically a skirt, not quite. I mean, it's got some pockets sometimes. My brother, he had a professor for his audiology program who always wore kilts, specifically cargo pants kilts. I saw him once walking, we went to the same school, I saw him once my brother pointed him out. Cargo pants kilts? Oh my god, so many pockets. So many pockets. Freaking want that for myself. Freaking want that. It doesn't even need to be that look, but the amount of pockets in that thing, that sounds nice. Now, if skirts could actually come with that many pockets, I'd be very happy. I have 5 skirts, 2 with pockets, and honestly, that's just because I really looked for ones with pockets. While I know I'm only at the 1930s, people were pretty against, from the 1920s up, women were actually starting to wear pants. It wasn't mainstream, you wouldn't really see that. It wasn't even until the 50s that you would see a woman in pants on, TV or anything, which I also realized wasn't a thing before that, but, women were not shown to be wearing pants very often before that. And even in the 50s, there was a lot of controversy about it. It wasn't really till the 60s that women really wore pants. Mainstream, a lot. Through the history of fashion, it has usually been pretty sexist towards women. I would say that we've hit a point where it's, in some ways, more detrimental for men. Not entirely, because at least men's pants have actual genuine measurements. You can figure out their waist and length. Me, these shorts are a size 11, but my jeans are a size 5, and I have a skirt that's a size 4, and I think my prom dress was a size 2. I am not a 2, but sizes are arbitrary. I also have another pair of shorts that are a size 8. At least I think these shorts are a size 11. Could have been my skirt. Anyway, so don't get me wrong. Fashion is still, as a whole, fashion industry is still very sexist towards women. We don't get as good quality pockets. We don't get pockets we can actually fit our stuff in. We take so much longer in dressing rooms than men because unlike a guy who can be like, here's my measurement, now let me see if I like what this is. All right, I like it, cool, I'll buy it, or no, I don't. Let's move on. Women are like, well, I think I like the way this pants looks, but I don't know if I'm size 2 to 10. So I guess I'm gonna bring a bunch in and keep trying until I find one that fits me. And then even after fitting all those ones, and when you find one that actually does fit, you might be like, I actually don't like the way this looks on me. But you've just spent so much longer than a man did in the dressing room because, well, nothing was the right size. Also, don't think men tend to deal with this, and this doesn't really have much to do with size, but if you're a woman, you might not have, but I've definitely had this moment, trying on a dress, and suddenly you're stuck in it. Somehow you got it on, but you cannot get it off, or you can't get it fully on, and you're a little bit panicky that you're going to have to buy it because you might rip it. I have felt that panic before. I remember in high school one time having to call my mom into the dressing room to help me out of one because I was genuinely stuck. So, hilarious in a comedy movie. Honestly, they should really take advantage of the fact that that happens more often, but like, it's really not fun. Yeah, but there's also other things that are wrong. Like, in the US, our shoe measurements are, again, arbitrary. But that's the same for men and women. But if you go to, like, other countries, they measure, like, actually the length of the foot or the width of the foot. Like, their shoe sizes make actual sense in genuine measurements, not some arbitrary 7 or something. But as for a cultural thing, I think, at least in the US, that people have become more acceptable or more accepting of women wearing masculine clothes or whatever. But they tend to struggle more with men choosing to wear more feminine clothes, and I think that's ridiculous. Wear whatever you feel confident in. Wear whatever makes you happy. I mean, it shouldn't matter what the rest of society thinks on it. Obviously it does. There are some dangers. Because people are violent and stupid sometimes. Sorry, so I was hitting the 1930s. I know, I keep going on quite a few tangents. It's what I do. Anyway. It's also because it's how my brain works. It literally jumps around a lot. No, I actually do not have ADD. I know, I saw a psychiatrist about that once. I have attention issues, but I don't actually qualify as ADD or ADHD. Which also makes sense because it has to negatively affect your life, and I could focus just fine in school. I was perfectly good with work. I mean, it's really just that my brain jumps very quickly from point A to point C because it's just the way my brain works. Okay, sorry. Anyway, moving on. The 1930s, clothes got even slimmer for women, so there was literally no room for pockets. It basically completely removed what the 20s had succeeded in doing. 30s and 40s, some women had pockets, but as the fashion designer Christian Dior said, men have pockets to keep things in, women for decoration. Which pretty much shows women's pockets, useless. At least in that point. And honestly, that statement's still pretty damn true today. I mean, women today, you could find a pair of jeans and be like, oh, cool, oh, that's a fake pocket. Fake pockets. Literally a thing for women. Or you find a pocket that's too small, you can't put anything in there. Part of why women haven't really had the same level of pockets as men, a lot of fashion industry people will comment about how they want women's figures to look nice and everything, and that you don't look nice if there's stuff in your pockets, which I think is ridiculous. One, women look nice however they want, and two, I think that this looks pretty nice. It's got keys, but you know what? Still working fine. Hand in, whatever. Actually, watch. I can even put a Gatorade in. I don't think that's half bad. Yes, that's a bit weird. But look, oh, also, yeah, seriously, these are so nice pockets. I can fit a Gatorade in my pocket. Anyway, my point being, and I do realize every time I stand up that you get the weird cut off of like where my green screen is to the ceiling. Sorry, I just don't care enough to fix that. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's fine. And who gives a crap what women's figures look like anyway? Let the woman decide how she wants to look. Whether that's fully covered up or in skin-tight clothes. That's up to her. World War II. Pockets definitely were a thing for men and women. Women became the big part of the workforce while men fought the war, so everyone had pockets. Pretty good, decent-sized pockets, because when world wars hit, people become practical. So pockets were a thing. However, post-World War II, pockets pretty much died out for women as handbags became the big thing, purses. Now, the thing is, women were not left with much choice. It's not that women were like, yeah, I really want a purse instead of a pocket. It's that fashion industry stopped making pockets for women pretty much. You couldn't find things with pockets. So your choice was carry nothing or buy a purse. So women bought purses and the handbag industry took off. Now, I'm not saying no one ever wanted one. I have a purse, which I painted myself. I admit the compass sort of faded. Anyway, but it's not big because I personally don't care to have purses. But since most of what I wear, I can't fit my phone in usually, or other things, or cards, chapstick, Motrin, whatever. At least my purse actually can. But yeah, the point being, it has an impact. I'm not someone who particularly cares to have a purse, but I still do because society kind of made it in such a way that I don't really feel like I can get away with not having one so easily, especially in summertime when like clothes are not for the most part going to let me have room to put stuff. In winter I can get away with it a little bit more, but I still tend to have a purse, but just because there's more pockets and layers and stuff. But that's also why I tend to paint my own thing. Might as well make it my own. One, I made the whole map of the world. That was a cool purse. It broke though. It's been a while. But yes, around the 40s women were told pockets would ruin their silhouette. So that's ridiculous. I don't get me wrong, I also think it's ridiculous when things go the other way. I don't think men should be saying how women should be, what they should do with their hair, how they should be dressing. I also don't think women should be telling men that. I don't think it's fair for women to say that sort of thing to men either. If you don't want them saying it to you, don't say it to them. We hit the 50s. So, 50s was a giant push to get women to be in the home, be the caretaker, be all that, be the stay-at-home wife. The classic 50s thing. Which for me personally, so annoying. Ooh, also, no, I'm sorry, I just have to say this. Okay, so the Nancy Drew novels, I know different authors, but the one who wrote a lot in the 1920s, so Nancy Drew is supposed to be like this teen woman, this teen girl just solving crimes and stuff, and yeah, often doing better than the police. 50s didn't like that attitude, so they changed things a little bit. Somebody went back, rewrote some of the parts of the 1920s Nancy Drew ones and republished. So if you ever want to read a Nancy Drew book and you want her to be stronger, more independent, more cooler, in my opinion, try to make sure it was published in the 20s or at least definitely not the 50s. I don't know about publishing dates after that, but don't go with the ones published in the 50s. They screw up everything. I get that they have different beliefs, but rewriting something is ridiculous. Like, write your own Nancy Drew novels at the time. Multiple authors. By pushing women out of the workforce and wanting them home, women ended up with no or very few pockets, because women weren't supposed to need them. Purses were more easily stolen, however. I couldn't find the statistics on it, except the statistics of pickpocketing of wallets or purses is really very high, actually. I should have written that down. I didn't. A very high statistic. I was trying to find the difference between purses being stolen versus wallets, but there wasn't really anywhere online that I could find that information, so, because they kind of just lump it together. But intuitively, I would guess that purses are stolen far more often than wallets. I know wallets are stolen more if you keep it in, like, your back pocket, but purses you could cut the strap of and then just take the whole purse. It's much easier to get away with that. Today, though, almost everybody carries around phone, wallet, keys. People need functioning pockets to really just work around today. And it doesn't help. Phones are getting larger and larger, which makes sense because we start to watch things on our phones. But women's pockets are not getting larger, for the most part. Most of my pockets, this much of the phone is still sticking out of the freaking pocket because they don't fit. So they often fall out. I mean, the fashion industry isn't adapting for the change in technology or the change in what we tend to carry on with ourselves. Also, random fact, jeans, you know that teeny tiny little pocket? That used to be for pocket watches. The whole reason that tiny pocket came about ever was because pants used to have a tiny little pocket to carry a pocket watch. And for some reason, even when people stopped carrying around pocket watches, the fashion never changed. It just stayed. So now there's always that tiny little pocket that nobody really knows what to use it for. It's just there. Also, on a random note, the little rivets you can see in jeans, those are actually just to help prevent tear, and it keeps the jeans together and makes them last longer. So that is very much still functioning. The little pocket doesn't have much function now. But oh well, still interesting fact to know, pocket watches. That pretty much catches us up to today on the European history of pockets. I just wanted to say, sophomore year of high school for homecoming, I actually did have a nice red dress that had genuine pockets. It's the whole reason I bought it. At school dances and stuff, or other things, I would always have to ask either my brother or some of my guy friends, either the choice was to have them carry something for me, or I'd have to coat check it with everything else. The thing is, men mostly didn't have to coat check anything. Guys could still have their phones on them while they were at the dance, they could have that. Women couldn't because for the most part, our dresses had no pockets. We had nothing to carry. So while guys could take a picture randomly, women couldn't. We had to freaking coat check it because we couldn't carry our phone. So that dress was nice. Didn't have to ask my friends, didn't have to ask my brother, none of that. But it also does mess with people, with women's independence is what I'm trying to say. Because a guy could look really nice, but he's still got his phone or keys with him. He's still fine. He can still do what he's got to do, even if he checked in his coat. Women, on the other hand, mostly can't carry anything. I mean, I specifically look for dresses that have pockets, and even still, most of mine don't. Luckily for me, a good chunk of my friends are guys, so I could ask, although I always just ask my brother, because that does lessen women's independence. Guys don't want to be carrying around their girlfriends, their sisters, their friend who's a woman's stuff. They don't. Guys don't want to deal with carrying around all the stuff women are holding, and women would greatly be happy to carry it themselves. If you actually gave us, fashion industry, something to do that with. If we could carry it ourselves, I wouldn't want to ask my brother or my guy friends. I'd be completely content to carry it myself, on me, the whole time. I don't want to hand all my stuff over. It messes with our independence. Oh, also, another way that you know women like pockets, if you ever compliment a woman and say, "That's a really nice dress," her first response, if it has pockets, will be, "Thank you, it has pockets." I know, because I've said that. Why? Because we like having pockets. They're helpful. Seriously, don't get why people don't get that. Okay. So, for Japan, what I found is men's kimonos kind of are like pockets, but not. The sleeves basically have giant bag sleeves. You can put a lot of stuff in there. I mean, it could fall out though, so it's not as stable as like a pocket, partly because it is in the sleeve, but it's sewn in such a way that it is basically a bag that can store stuff within the pocket. It's why sometimes if you're maybe watching a Japanese movie or something and the guy's wearing a kimono, that the guy will reach into his sleeve and take something out, because it's actually a big old pouch basically in the sleeve. Unfortunately, women's kimonos don't have that. They're not sewn in the same way. I will say this, though. Apparently, women's kimonos are sewn in such a way that women can breastfeed easier, so that's nice, I guess. Other than kimonos, though, I really didn't find anything within Japanese history of pocket-like things. It also helps to understand that in a kimono, I guess the sleeve is separate from the rest of the outfit. It's not actually, except for the shoulder. Like, apparently, except for the top of the shoulder, it's its own separate thing. It's not as attached in the same way we would think. Like, not the way this sleeve's attached. I'd have to probably look directly at a kimono to understand exactly how the description described it being sewn. But other than that, I really didn't find anything about pouches or pockets. They did have containers that would hang from the kimono by cords, so kind of like how pouches in the past in Europe were very much tied on. Only theirs wasn't just like some leather or animal material. It was usually much more like ceramic or something. However, that's pretty much changed over time from being a pouch type container to actually an entire art form, and it stopped being anything you could really carry anything in because they were very intricately carved and it just became an art thing. In Korean, there's a traditional coin purse, but I couldn't find anything about pockets. It's just a little pouch traditionally for coins. China, all I could find is that in ancient China they used bags for things, never really pockets weren't a thing. Later on, they had a pouch that was like tied to their belt. The earliest pouch in China that people found was about 770 to 476 BC. For all three of those countries, and I do realize Asia has more than just those three. It's, like I said, I really couldn't find anything other than Europe, pretty much. But for all three of those countries, around the 1900s, Western fashion and stuff started to pick up and catch on. And because of this, yeah, they all pretty much have pockets because we have pockets. I mean, everywhere in the world that has what European fashion became pretty much has pockets. Probably still kind of sexist towards women, but I really couldn't find anything else. I'm very sorry. History is very much told from a European perspective. Like I said, that's the most I could pretty much find on Asia, and when it came to Africa, nothing. Now, I will say, not all women want pockets. Personally, I would say the majority do. If you want, you can like, you can subscribe, follow, don't follow. Oh, again, always up to you. Enjoy the rest of your day, or night, or whenever it is.